Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting the show this evening. On the chart here for the breakup map, we've got, the Yukon River, Porcupine River, still pretty much mostly ice, but the Tanana River opening up nicely here, all the way down to the Yukon and also the Kuskokwim here. So everything progressing nice and easy and orderly with no warnings, watches, or advisories of any kind out. And from there, moving on to the fire danger. You can see pretty extreme here through the central interior up north of the mountains, and high fire danger covering just about all the Kenai Peninsula, South Central Alaska areas back into the Kuskokwim Valley, especially the northern areas there. We had the breeze going today, and on down into the northern parts of the southeast coastal areas. On the satellite, got a band of moisture here over the southern southeast coast. Early on, that dissipating out, another one coming up, but that's all going to stall out and eventually pull back off to the southeast, and it'll just produce some continued variable cloudiness down in that area, but nothing but sun, northeast winds, and warm temperatures rising into the 70 to 80 degree range over the southeast coast today in some areas, back up toward Yakutat, 70s into the Seward area as well, and temperatures approaching the lower 70s in over the interior. A lot of record highs set around, notably Yakutat was 73 degrees, Seward had 72, and Valdez again had 70. Those are all record highs. There are many others. Dillingham set a record high today, for example. Really too many to list. And back out to the west, so a little cooler under the cloud cover. You can see high pressure aloft. Actually, you can sort of see it here. It's circulation right in this area. So it's a little farther to the east than it was yesterday, and more southeast flow. This is just cirrus here coming across the area and dissipating. This really cirrus down here as well, but frontal boundary out here, a couple of them, this one right through here and another one back out to the west. Those will be edging their way inland and to the east slowly here over the next couple of days, and not a lot going on out over the Aleutians as well. Pretty quiet, all the main storminess staying down to the south of the main jet, but there is a jet coming across the Russian Far East pushing that system eastward, and watching this loop go again, and see things actually backing a little bit back to the west here, but that'll be soon to change as things begin to push their way inland slowly from the west as high pressure back out in this area continues to build up. That's going to allow this system to kick off to the east. The big upper high overs will break down and slide off to the southeast. But it'll take a couple of days, at least through the weekend, to do that. So watch for conditions back here to the west to gradually deteriorate, and you'll see a little bit more in the way of precipitation occurring, or the chances of precipitation, rain or snow, fog, drizzle, that sort of rainfall there up to the north tonight. And we saw it out along the coast today in some areas, but we'll see tonight this front begins to edge its way eastward. That's the first one there. Genesis occurring back in this area with another low there over the Russian Far East, and the colder temperatures with snow and some moisture extending up to the northeast as well, but just clipping the western Arctic coast there. The east side is going to stay really nice, generally offshore flow like you saw today. Lots of clear skies, maybe some variable cloudiness, but those will be VFR type clouds there. Nothing but clear skies, light winds over all of interior Alaska, right down into the Gulf here, and of course Kodiak Island. And still some leftover variable clouds there over the southern southeast coast. You can see most of the precipitation and rainfall will be down to the south and southeast. These showers back through here, they'll stay over in Canada. And so the prospect for tomorrow is another sunny, hot day here thermal low over the Copper River Basin, which extends up to the Tanana Valley and then back down into the Madanuska and Susitna Valley. So look for temperatures to run tomorrow for the highs anywhere from 65 to 75 in this area. But a little bit cooler here. That first front really washing out, but a band of clouds coming in. You're going to see increasing southwest wind flow aloft here. But should be dry, but the increase in the clouds, I'll keep the temperatures down a little bit. Cooler back out here to the west. The next front coming into the Bering Strait. A little bit stronger, but just a chance of some rainfall here, St. Lawrence Island, western Seward Peninsula, on up into Kivalina. And could see some gusty southwest winds possibly there along the western capes. Rain or snow, western Arctic coast. Clear skies, a lot of sunshine on the east side there from, well, anywhere east of Barrow. Probably see nothing but sunshine tomorrow and fairly light winds, but light winds also now over this area here. Very slight gradient, so fire danger won't be all that high as it could be if you had windier conditions. Less wind here over the southeast coast. Could still see some 10 to 20 mile per hour winds into the early part of tomorrow, but then that whole pattern will be dropping even less than that, and that'll continue through Sunday. This system staying down to the south and high pressure here ridging in along the southern Bering Sea up in toward Bristol Bay and then back out to the west. And again, that's going to allow this system to drop southeastward. Saturday night and Sunday will look like this. It should move to the eastern Arctic coast with a chance of precipitation there, and then a narrow band of rain along the frontal boundary extending back to the southwest into Kuskokwim Bay. The main push, this with the flow coming like that, is going to tend to push this to the south, and it'll stretch it out in this area. So most of the precipitation, as light as it'll be, will stay up here to the north. Some cooler temperatures behind for rain and snow showers. Another batch coming in, another trough swinging into the western Arctic coast. This thing could kick the winds up. Could see brisk wind advisories in that actually 20 to 30 knot winds possible here on the west side of the Arctic coast if that low center tracks eastward like it's forecast to do here on this chart, with snow showers down into the Bering Strait, but high pressure really in control of the Bering Sea, so light winds and variable clouds out there. Another very nice day here, mostly sunny, the Copper River Basin back into south central Alaska, but during the afternoon hours, the southwest flow aloft increases. As this front approaches the Alaska Range, look for the clouds to increase. Probably looking at an overcast day in the afternoon, right up to the Chugach, Talkeetna Mountains, and should stay pretty nice over Prince William Sound. Light winds. Another sunny day, expect mostly sunny skies again. Mild temperatures for the southeast coast with little in the way of any cloudiness at all. And then this front, look for some afternoon showers to develop in advance of the front along the western Alaska Range, actually all the way around the mountain range there. So mostly cloudy, definitely a lot more cloudiness over the Tanana Valley and eastward there tomorrow, or for Sunday, than you'll see tomorrow. And probably, it's hard to say if this front will ever get past the Alaska Range. It looks like most of the moisture and energy will stay up to the north into the first of next week. And for temperatures this afternoon, again, 60s and lower 70s, 70 degrees, that's a 4 o'clock reading at Fairbanks, 72 in Talkeetna. Also over at Sleepmute, 72 degrees, while McGrath had 67, 69 at Nenana, and a 65 at Gulkana. 60s to 70s here across the Susitna Valley down into northern Cook Inlet, 56 at Homer. They set a record today with, I believe it was 64 degrees earlier before a sea breeze kicked in. That was the same situation with Seward. Had the warmer temperature early in the afternoon before the winds turned to the south. There's that 72. That was a record high for Seward. And 57 at Middleton Island, but lower 70s all along the North Gulf Coast here, and that actually into the southeast coast as well, with Skagway at 68, 70 degrees all afternoon at Sitka with northeast winds 10 to 20, 25 miles an hour at times, and pretty gusty here in some areas on the northern southeast coast. Lighter down to the south, 55 with more clouds down at Klawock. 60s, lower 60s for Kodiak Island, and Bristol Bay out along the coast in the 40s, but King Salmon and the interior areas of that zone into the mid 60s. And for the southwest coast, right along 40s out along the coastline there, mid 30s for the St. Lawrence Island area, mid 40s here for the Pribilofs, as well as the eastern Aleutians, actually all the Aleutians into the 40s, lower to 50s here for the Alaska Peninsula. And for the lows tonight, teens to mid-20s there for the eastern Arctic coast. A little bit cooler, mostly over the north slope, dropping into the teens there with 30s and 40s. Big area here staying above freezing. Most of the central interior, even back out to the coastline. Upper 30s to lower 40s for Bristol Bay, and upper 30s there for the Alaska Peninsula. 40s all along the North Gulf Coast, and upper 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle. And for the highs tomorrow, again, much like today, 60s to lower 70s here over the interior. Cooler back toward the coast, 40s right along the coastline to 30s out in the Bering Sea. That temperature pattern extending up along the Arctic coast as well. But the North Slope warming up here, especially on the lee side of the Brooks Range there. Could pop into the 50s there, but definitely higher than that here. South of the mountains with 60s right down to the coastline again. 50s to mid-60s for the Panhandle, 40s for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Tomorrow, look for some marginal VFR to begin to edge its way eastward here as that front slips into the Bering Strait. The first one, again, washing out, but the next one spreading the IFR in across St. Lawrence Island, or keeping it in. It's already out there up through the Bering Strait and into the northwest, but making it a little more extensive and a little farther to the east as the day goes on with some marginal stuff trailing all the way back out to Shimia. Otherwise, good VFR again for much of the Aleutian, southern Bering Sea, up along the coast, Gulf of Alaska, up to the eastern Arctic coast. That whole area is VFR, and that includes the Panhandle. For the passes, Anatuvik, good VFR in either approach. Same forecast for Adigan. And Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. While rainy should be VFR, will be VFR, and windy as well. In fact, I think all these passes are VFR through tomorrow, and Mentasta, Tanita looking really good. Portage, VFR, Chilkoot and White, VFR, probably through the weekend. Freezing levels shows the warm air up from the south as that upper level ridge edges its way eastward. That southerly wind flow pulling the warm air right up into the Arctic. And then behind the front, much colder temperatures coming into the northern Bering Sea. Really warm stuff out over the western Aleutians. And then northerly flow here pulling colder temperatures down into the Yukon and 2,000 feet spreading into the northern parts of the southeast coast. And from there, we'll take a look at icing. Really no threats of anything except out here along the western Arctic coast and down through the Bering Strait into the northern Bering Sea there, but staying back to the north and west of the islands out here and staying off the coast through a good portion of tomorrow, and then that'll slip on in tomorrow night. And then for the winds aloft, here's the upper level ridge beginning to break down a little bit, but tomorrow holding strong over the entire area, but giving way to this southwest jet. Actually, strong jet across the southern coast of Russia there, takes a turn to the north, but that entire pattern again shifting eastward as this upper level low begins to slide its way on to the east as high pressure continues to build out to the west. Northerly jet could create some higher level turbulence conditions here for the northern parts of the southeast coast. And for 9,000 foot winds, pretty good trough at this level with southwesterly flow, 20 to 40 knots here coming right into the coastline. Pretty strong even out over the western Brooks Range area, but much lighter as you get in toward the ridge. Northeasterlies up to 35 knots over the southern southeast coast, lighter to the north, light winds over the southern Bering Sea, eastern Aleutians and Peninsula, and actually pretty light winds all the way out to the west. 3,000 foot level, much the same pattern as trough, but not quite as strong on the winds, 20 to 30 knots here in this area. Again, all advancing eastward, but very light here with the central and eastern interior, south central Alaska, no wind at all, very light conditions with this high pressure ridge over the southern Bering Sea, Bristol Bay, and especially out under the center there over the western Aleutians. Could see some 25 knot winds here early on, mostly in the morning hours there for the southeast coast. And for the turbulence, occasional moderate chop there, below 4,000 feet, and especially for smaller aircraft in that area. And then with the wind conditions here, look for moderate turbulence there from the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula up over the northwest. Another band out through here. They'll be progressing in toward the Yukon Delta coast probably Saturday night and into early Sunday. Then some leftover mechanical turbulence possible here for the Kilbrook Mountains, Togiak area, Cape Newenham, maybe as far east as Dillingham, and then on the lee side of the Aleutian Range, but pretty smooth out here, again, for most of the southern Bering Sea, the Aleutians. The Pribilofs are right on the edge of things. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest again this evening is Walt Parker. Walt ran an air taxi out of Minchumina back in the late 40s, early 50s, and we started talking, last time he was on the show, we started talking about an exciting story about flying to the North Pole in an AN-2 Russian airplane with his friend Ron Sheardown. Welcome back to Hangar Flying, Walt.
Well, thank you.
So let's try to continue on, talk a little about, so you guys flew from where, from Barrow?
From Barrow to the pole, and then from the pole on to Spitsbergen, Long Airman in Spitsbergen, and spent a couple of days there and headed back. And we had a new passenger, the head of aviation in Norway, of Arctic and Antarctic aviation in Norway, and he'd never been to the pole. So we decided to accommodate him. We arrived over the pole, and we had the 185 with us, and its job was to go in first and test the ice, because the AN-2 is a pretty heavy airplane. And it was on wheels, and of course the 185 was on skis. So we circled around, and Ron cut a real tight pattern, and the guys had just got out and were just checking the ice. And Ron cut a tight pattern and came in and started to land, and they were waving him off, and we sat down and plunk, the wheels went through. So we skidded to a stop on the lower wing with the wheels, of course, braking us nicely, and got out of the airplane, walked right out on the ice. I got in the 185 with Matthews, the pilot, and we headed, after we were sure they were going to be picked up by the Canadians, we had good contact, we headed for Dead Horse.
So the airplane was on the ice, but it hadn't sunk yet. It was
No,
still
it was sitting on its lower wing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we headed for Dead Horse, and it was a long haul for the 185. I like flying at altitude, so I took her up to 14 grand, and Lee didn't like flying at that altitude, but he admitted we had to do it if we were going to make it. So we had some troubles with navigation and what have you, but we finally arrived over Dead Horse at 10 grand and spiraled down, spent the night and came on home, and got home not too long before Donnie
Olson.
Donnie Olson had gone to get the guys in mid-Canada and picked them up there, and so we arrived not long before he showed up with the guys. And that was a long haul for Donnie to go get those guys, but he's a good egg.
Mm-hmm. So how many hours would that have taken to fly up there?
12, 14.
Yeah, that's a long ways to go. So they rescued the rest of the people that were there,
Yeah.
and then the airplane, you guys planned on a rescue party to get the airplane after that.
Yeah. So went through Murmansk, and Ron convinced the Russians to give icebreaker transportation to the pole. Arrived, no airplane had sunk through the ice. It was about 14,000 feet down. So ice moved 6 miles an hour at the pole. I mean, sorry, 6 miles a day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate. I remember that airplane. It was a nice airplane too. So, and so what was your thoughts going through your head when the airplane broke through the ice? Were you concerned, or was it a kind of a? I know it was a large event, but in your case, I mean, you obviously was stable. The bottom wing was on.
I was not particularly concerned. I was concerned for Ron having his airplane sitting there at the North Pole. Knew it'd be difficult to retrieve if ever. So, but I'd been through the ice before, so we just got out in the ice and started calling. the Canadians in setting up the rescue of the rest of them couldn't fit in the 185.
Interesting. Well, that's a great story. I'd heard that before from different. I'd heard that from Ron Sheardown and other people. So it's quite a story. Well, Walt, I thank you very much for being on our show. Thanks for sharing your story with us. It was pretty interesting. I don't think too many people have a story that involves the North Pole in an AN2. That's for sure.
No, not unless you're in the Russian Air Force.
I suppose that's true. So, folks, thanks very much for joining us. Remember, if your airplane has been parked for the winter, please take the time to thoroughly pre-flight and strongly consider bringing along a safety pilot, or better yet, get an instructor when you take her out for the first time this summer. Thanks very much for watching, and fly safe.
Okay, well, tomorrow the strongest wind should occur during the morning hours, up around 20 knots. Higher gusts again over the northern areas, up to 20 knots. That means it could be less out here along the coast. Definitely up along the north coast will be less. And maybe 20-knot winds over the southern inner channels. But for Sunday, that should go lighter, light and variable to mostly northwest here along the coast, 10 to 15 knots. But over the inner channels, really light conditions there, mostly from a westerly direction at about 10. Swinging around to the south there for Lynn Canal, 10 to 15 knots as lower pressure develops up over the Yukon. And for the south central areas, pretty light and variable there for the Kamishak Bay area down across Shelikof Straits. Not much different, a little more westerly up to 15 here for the western Gulf Coast. Back to light and variable conditions there around Middleton Island up into Prince William Sound. And actually all of Cook Inlet here will be light and variable. Afternoon maybe southwest there as you come up through the Forelands, but very light up north of there. And then for Sunday, everything turns a little more southwesterly, possibly up to 20 knots here for Shelikof Strait. Otherwise, pretty light, but definitely a change in the making going on here with all these winds turning southwest. 10 to 15 knots here, especially out over the Gulf of Alaska. 10 to 15, probably looking at 15 knots there on the east side of Kodiak in that zone. For Bristol Bay, westerlies of 15, northeast or north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots for the peninsula, and mostly northerly winds there south of Kodiak or southwest of Sitkinak. And then those go just about dead calm, at least for a portion of the day Sunday, as area of high pressure moves right over that zone. Northwest up to 15 for Bristol Bay, but northeasterlies, it looks like as that northerly flow comes down, it'll kind of accelerate a little bit, giving 15-knot winds on the Pacific or the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Lighter winds down here on the south side. For the Aleutians, northerlies to northeasterlies, 15 to 20 knots for the Fox Islands tomorrow, and about the same here out over the central Aleutians, but definitely light and variable, and there's some good high pressure out over these western zones towards Shemya. And those will stay light on Sunday, but maybe get a little more discernible direction out there at 10 knots, 15 knots in toward Adak, northeast at about 15 here. Give or take a few knots either side of that through the day on Sunday. Up in the Bering Sea, southwesterlies here, again as that front comes across and the lower pressure up over the Chukchi Sea, should give some small craft advisory winds at the St. Lawrence Island areas. Otherwise, across the northern Bering, looking at 20 to 22 or 3-knot winds across this area. Lighter, though, for the Pribilofs. And then Sunday, everything lightens up considerably here over the St. Lawrence Island area, and only 10 knots across the northern Bering Sea. Southwest coast, northwest at 10, north 15 there south of Nunivak Island. Northerlies at 15 for the Pribilofs. And the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow, easterlies of 15 knots, light, variable to south winds here on the central and west side. Definitely southwest here for the for this zone, and then southerlies for the Kotzebue Sound region. And then on for Sunday's outlook, again, that next pretty good trough coming in should kick those winds up 25, maybe even 30 knots through this area. For a time on Sunday, tending to become lighter back down to the south, westerly 15 there across the Chukchi Sea and in toward the Sound. Southwest at about 20 on the central coast, but staying quite light, but westerly 5 to 10 knots on the east side. For tonight, again, nothing but clear skies in over the interior. It's pretty light wind, staying breezy here over the northern southeast coast. You can see most of the gradient right up in this area here, so that's where you'll see the continued gusty winds, but lighter winds down to the south and a few clouds. Nice over on the eastern Arctic coast, but get back into some possible lower stuff with just a risk of some rain or snow or sprinkles or flurries here on the west side. Most of this right in the Bering Strait there, this first front edging eastward, washing out as it comes, but coming over the top of this high. There's a next one there back to the west that we're watching, and should tomorrow move to about this position by the mid-afternoon hours tomorrow. That low center kicking up to the northeast, that first front washing out, but a band of clouds will be coming in with that as the southwest flow aloft increases. A thermal low over the southeast interior, making for a very warm day with a lot of sunshine, light winds, temperatures 60s to mid 70s in this area. Nice conditions back into Kodiak Island as well as Bristol Bay. Pick up a few clouds here, onshore flow along the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Just variable clouds with patchy fog and light winds under high pressure along the entire stretch of the Aleutian Range and the southeast coast. Winds trending down here where they are a little gusty into tomorrow morning, and staying light but dry. A few clouds there over the southern southeast coast, and that any threat of moisture you have tomorrow is definitely gone tomorrow night, and another sunny day in store for the Panhandle. Juneau over to Yakutat looking really good. Southeast interior, but definitely more clouds and a better chance of showers, and much cooler temperatures coming in with this. You can see back behind the colder air and just snow up along the western Arctic coast. Have a great weekend and good night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.